in the far reach of Ultima Segmentum, beneath the blue-lit halls of Macragge. There are doors sealed not by key, but by silence. The Ultramarines are paragons of order, keepers of legacy. They walk the Emperor's path with pride, never faltering, never forgetting. And yet there are chambers even they no longer enter. Vaults beneath the fortress of Hera, buried before the heresy, untouched even in Guilliman's resurrection. Records are incomplete. The few listed deployments to Vault Primaris 9-14 end in redacted cipher. No names, no return. It is said that Guilliman himself forbade further descent, citing a single reason: do not wake what remembers. This is not a story of war. It is not a tale of victory or defeat. It is the echo of something caged, of a silence that deepens, of a vault where even the Adeptus Astartes tread lightly. One squad was dispatched, alone. They did not return. Only one Vox file was found, buried in the cogitator logs of a servitor 3 decks above. Its origin is unverified, its contents preserved. We begin there. He said his name once. It was recorded in the initial 10 seconds of the Vox log, distorted by static, barely audible through the grain. Astartes' Vox signature confirmed, though blurred beyond forensic match. The voice was tired, which was wrong. Ultramarines do not tire, they endure. They do not stammer, they recite. But in this log, the voice breaks once, not in pain, in hesitation. The log continues for 19 minutes. Descriptions shift, dates loop. The speaker miscounts his squad number twice. By minute 7, he refers to himself in the third person. By minute 14, the voice is joined by another, identical, but delayed by 2 seconds. No indication of external contact. At minute 17, one phrase repeats. "We were never supposed to come here," Guilliman said. The Vox ends mid-word. The final sound is not a scream. It is the sound of armor breathing. The log was sealed in a servitor's cortex, discovered wandering 3 decks above Vault 914. The servitor had no legs. It had walked there anyway. It arrived as a sealed codex command, layered with 12 encryption glyphs, each bearing the sigil of Ultramar. The purity wax was cracked, not by hand, by time, as if the seal had waited longer than any of us had existed. We were called to the fortress of Hera's lower spires, beneath the vault rings where even the chapter's scribes do not tread unless told. The corridor that leads there is unused, not abandoned, not forbidden, just unremembered. Sergeant Cadis read the order twice, once aloud, once silently. Then he nodded, not in acceptance, in recognition. We were 7, an odd number, but no one questioned it. The command bore no banner, no author. It began with coordinates and ended with silence. Not a single word of honor. No reference to Guilliman's voice or the will of the Codex Astartes. Just latitude, elevation, and the name of a vault most had not heard spoken in centuries. Vault 9-14 Primaris. None of us knew what it held. The fortress lists it as sealed since the heresy. Some archivists say it was closed even before that. During the days when Guilliman walked these halls as a son rather than a symbol. Brother Thesis, our lexicanum, was the only one who flinched when the vault designation was spoken. He said it reminded him of a dream, but he could not say which one. We followed Cadis in silence. There was no litany before descent, no pre-battle benediction, no war hymn. That was the first break in pattern. It unnerved me more than the vault's summons, even in purging Xenos nests or descending into warp-wrecked catacombs we recite. We announce ourselves to the Emperor and to the Dark. This time, there was nothing, The entry lift was still functional, though it bore no lights. The runes on the lift walls were faded, not damaged, withheld, as though the metal itself refused to remember what had been carved into it. We descended for 7 minutes, longer than the fortress's schematics should allow. The air grew warmer, not the discomfort of heat, but the sense of closeness, of being pressed gently between thoughts. Our armor vents cycled normally, yet the hum echoed strangely in our helmets. No vox disturbance, no external bleed, just a hum. When we reached the terminus platform, the vault stood before us, larger than the room allowed. The geometry was wrong, not by angle, by implication. The door bore the symbol of Ultramar, half erased by oxidation. Beneath it, another sigil, no longer used. The pre-codex variant, before Guilliman's reforms. A glyph belonging to the days when his orders were questions, not laws. Thesis stepped forward, hand raised in silent augury. His fingers twitched slightly, not from nerves, from resistance. The air bent near the threshold, like heat over a reactor plate. No wards, he said at last. No psychic barrier, just quiet. Cadis gave the order. We approached in formation. There was no access panel, no terminal, no lock. The vault door opened as we reached it. No sound, just motion, as if it had expected us. Inside, the light changed. It wasn't dark, it wasn't bright, it was correct. The kind of light one finds in old churches, not from lumens, from memory, a stained glow that implies reverence without the need for source. Brother Agris, our devastator, spoke then. He asked a question I did not understand. It was in High Gothic, but the phrasing was wrong. Cadis turned to him. Say that again. Agris blinked. I said nothing, but I heard him. So did Thekas. And when I looked to where Agris had stood, I saw the imprint of his armor in the dust. There should have been no dust. The vault had been sealed. We entered. The walls were carved with frescoes, though their images shifted depending on who stood closest. For me, they showed the Great Crusade, but there were no names beneath the figures, no insignia, just forms, half formed, half melted into the stone. For Thetis, they showed a fleet adrift in a storm of screams. He said the walls wept for him. The inner antechamber bore a single object, a plinth, and on it, a helm. Ultramarine. Blue but darkened, burned around the eyes. The left optic had cracked, the right still blinked. We formed a perimeter, standard protocol, but the formation felt performative, like we were actors in a script already read by something else. Cadis reached for the helm. Thetis stopped him. There's something alive here. Not warp, Cadis asked. No. Worse. Known. The helm blinked again. It emitted a sound then. Not speech. Breath. Armor doesn't breathe. Thesis activated his staff and began a chant. Not an exorcism, not a banishment. Just a grounding rite, one used to center his thoughts before battle. The moment he spoke, the vault whispered back. Same cadence, same rhythm, but from the walls. I checked my helmet's seals, all green. The whispering continued for 10 seconds, then stopped. Cadis gave the retreat command. We did not move, not out of defiance, out of uncertainty. We could not tell if the command had been given already, or not yet. The vault remained open behind us. No wind stirred. No sudden chill marked the threshold. Yet none of us could shake the sensation that something had followed. Not in motion, in awareness. We stood in a hexagonal chamber, 15 meters across. The light shifted subtly from moment to moment, not flickering, not fading, just adjusting, as if aligning to the eyes of each observer. Thetis moved first. He placed his hand to the vault's interior wall, fingers barely grazing the metal. A pulse answered, not mechanical, organic. "Alive?" Cadis asked, helm tilting slightly. Thetis responded with hesitation. "No, not precisely." Behind us, the vault door began to close. None of us touched it. There was no mechanism visible, no grinding sound. The motion was slow, deliberate. When the seal met flush with the stone, a sound escaped the walls. A single exhalation. Not air, relief. We spread out, sweep pattern. Helm optics recorded in all spectrums. Our Auspex feeds remained nominal. Yet there were subtle deviations, a gravitational slant in Thesis's file, a minor auditory distortion in mine. Agris reported feeling heavier. Cadis gave no comment. His posture remained perfect. He was listening. The chamber's far wall bore a stairwell descending into shadow. Not true dark. A shadow made of suggestion. Something less than black. More than absence. We moved in. 2 minutes down, the temperature shifted. It didn't rise. It remembered heat. The stairwell grew longer than the descent justified. At 97 steps, Thetis paused. "There were only 40, he whispered. We checked our logs. 97. I turned to confirm the others. The top of the stairwell was gone. Not hidden, not concealed by curve or trick of light. It had never been. Behind us now stood only wall. Cadis rotated his stance. His bolt gun held low but active. "Stay with the path," he said. He did not need to say more. We continued down. The next chamber we entered was circular. Frescoes lined its edges again, though these were no longer abstract. They depicted Ultramarines, names we recognized, campaigns we had memorized during youth, but the sequences were wrong. Brother Jikon, seconded to the 5th Company, was shown dying in battle against Orcs during the Damnos campaign. He survived that conflict. We fought beside him on Talasar 2 years later. Other images followed. Battles that had not yet occurred. Faces we had never seen. Our own armor painted in colors we had never worn. And then one fresco depicted Cadis. He stood alone, helm removed, sword planted in stone. Above him, the seal of Ultramar burned. Beneath him, our corpses lay in the shape of the Aquila. Cadis stepped forward. Not quickly, not as a reaction. He simply moved as if it was necessary. I reached to stop him. He turned, and in that moment I saw his helm display. It was not our chamber. It showed stars, empty, cold, and drifting among them, a single vault, open, tethered to nothing. The image vanished. Cadis exhaled once. "We're not being shown lies," he said. "Only potential." Thetis spoke again. "Or memory." "How can memory show things that never were?" Agris asked. Thetis tilted his head. "You forget. The warp doesn't lie. It reflects. We lie to ourselves." No one answered that. We pressed on. Beyond the circular chamber lay a corridor of mirrored alcoves. No glass, just polished steel. At first they reflected our movements as expected. But then one did not. Agris passed a column. His reflection stayed behind. Cadis turned instantly, bolt gun rising. The reflection looked out at us. Its eyes were wrong. No lenses, just pale, recessed hollows. Its armor bore the sigil of the 13th, but wrong. Twisted. Not corrupted by chaos, muted by time. As if the purity had been worn off, scraped smooth by forgetting. Agris stepped back. The reflection did not move. It raised one hand slowly, then pointed behind him, toward the fresco chamber. We looked. It was gone. Behind us stood only Vaultstone, unmarked. Thetis activated his psychic ward. The hum was immediate, low and thick, but the reflection was no longer visible. The mirrored alcove was empty. The corridor curved ahead, too far, more than the fortress could contain. I whispered a caution. It echoed 3 times, each one closer than the last. Cadis turned to me. "You spoke?" I did. "Then who answered?" We halted. Helm recorders played back my audio feed. The echoes were not identical. One had a breath before the word, another mispronounced the phrase. The third repeated it with laughter woven beneath. A laughter like metal sliding against stone. Cadis broke protocol. He removed his helm. His face was calm, resolved. He whispered something into the air. The corridor responded. Ahead, a doorway appeared. No light framed it. No seal held it. It simply was. Cadis turned to us. "Whatever waits here, it's not unknown. It's forgotten." He paused. "By design." We entered the doorway. The next chamber had no ceiling, only sky. Stars hung motionless, not drifting, not real. Painted stars, murals spanning an impossible height. At the center of the room stood a column. Its surface bore names, half finished. One glowed faintly. It was Thesis, and next to it another name, Cadis. The third name had not yet formed, but the curve of the first letter was familiar, mine. We did not speak of the names we saw. None of us reached for explanations. The ceiling above us still stretched into that false sky, its mural stars neither moving nor alive, just there, painted, fixed, and yet somehow watching. It felt less like decoration and more like an eye that remembered everything it had ever seen, patient yet unmoved. The names on the pillar had faded to nothing, though I remembered the glow under Thesis' name, the faint ember that had sparked before vanishing, and the partial curve where my own had nearly formed. It felt like a warning wrapped in inevitability. I tried to tell myself it had been a trick of the vault's distortion. I reminded myself that no prophecy carries weight in a place where time no longer follows rule or reason. Logic, after all, was meaningless here. But conviction is not erased by reminders. Even as we moved through the next chamber, quiet and focused, something loosened inside us. Though our formation stayed intact, it felt less anchored, as if we were drifting inside our own skin. The corridor extended ahead, its walls curved into soft echoes of a spiral. Faded murals depicted battles none of us had fought, and each time we passed, the scenes shifted subtly, as if memory itself redrew history based on who watched them. Agris stopped at one such image, Ultramarines firing through a ruined corridor bathed in twilight. Soldiers crouched, shields raised. A berserk inquisitor dove from above. It was all too familiar, and yet impossible. Beneath the ruined dome, one figure stood out. Helm removed mid-charge, face exposed. The face was his, the scar above his browplate, still raw in this painted memory. Precision hairline, the curvature of his jaw, it was him. He reached forward, touching the cold stone frame. The fresco responded, not like a machine-changing state, but like an idea remembering itself. The corridor shimmered faintly. Tanks then recoiled. The Inquisitor's armor glowed with scenes unpainted moments earlier. The corridor in that image lived again, but not as memory, as a present moment grown old. Agris staggered back. He did not speak. Cadis stayed silent too, but his nod held everything needed. None dared breathe the name aloud. Thetis murmured in Old Kulth, invoking old blessings that sounded like pleas. The wall around the fresco blackened at the edges, curling like parchment scorched near flame. The image cracked down the center, revealing not stone beneath but oxidized iron, wet, sticky, and unmarked by rust. Cadis raised a gloved hand and pointed forward. We stepped ahead together into the next corridor, one with a barely perceptible incline. It curved tighter than any mapped layout of the fortress. After 20 paces, we realized we hadn't climbed a step yet. The sensation remained. We climbed in memory, not in space. My chronometer blinked erratically. Numbers pulsed, then vanished. Thetis tapped his helm twice, drew a blade, and slashed a mark into the fixture wall. A deep incision. We marched on. 30 paces later, we turned and found it gone. He carved another. We stepped. It vanished again. We halted. Thetis knelt and closed his eyes. He entered a trance. His lips said nothing, yet his lips moved. Or perhaps they did not. I couldn't tell. When his eyes opened, they were older, not tired but deepened, as though they had stared too long into something that refused to blink back. "There is no spatial loop," he said. His voice shook as if startled by the sound. "What repeats is the state of knowing. The vault recycles awareness. Only when we try to recall our progress does it begin again." We absorbed his words quietly. It was true. The walls shifted just off our vision, recalibrating around us. Every sense was drawn from memory, not from ground beneath us. Cadis called us onward. Don't question the path. Don't check for landmarks. We obeyed as though fate led us. Eventually, the corridor curved sharply to the left. A doorway revealed itself, smooth-edged, unsealed, silent. There had been no wall there a moment before. We stepped through into a small domed chamber. The threshold appeared gentle, yet crossing it felt like stepping into finality. In the center stood a single chair, not meant for comfort, more like an observation perch. Upon it sat a solitary figure, Astartes in pristine Mark IV armor, clean, unworn. The blue paint was faded in a way that suggested erasure, not decay. We raised no weapons. None of us felt anyone survived violence here. We moved closer in reverence and dread. The helm turned slowly, gears whirring in soft clicks. We did not speak as we stepped closer. The helm's lenses glowed red, though no power source registered in our Auspex readings. Then the Astartes spoke. It was not a voice from Vox. No distortion, not mechanical. Just a low vibration in the air, like hearing your name whispered by your own shadow. Thetis instinctively spoke a rite of identification. "Brother of the Watch, stand forth and be named." He leveled it at the seated warrior. The figure lifted one gauntlet and pointed behind us. We turned. The wall we had come through had closed silently behind. Not sealed. Gone, as if the air had closed in. On the far surface, a fresco formed in real time. Fresh paint bled red and iron across the stone, depicting 7 Astartes standing in a circle. The center figure, seated and faceless, mirrored the warrior before us in motion and posture. Surrounded, watched. We watched as the painting composed itself. From behind the red glaze, awareness re-emerged. I saw our own stances, our armor, our posture, freeze in pigment. Flesh given shape in stone that still felt living. Agris stepped forward and laid a gauntlet on the wall. The paint clung to his armor, not smeared. It transferred as if the art remembered the contact before it occurred. No one spoke again. We watched, bound to silence. The seated Astartes raised its other hand and placed it upon its chest plate. A hiss echoed from its armor as a panel slid open. Inside, not flesh, but a coil of black wire, spiraling like a trapped echo. It remained motionless, yet its significance felt louder than any voice. Thecus withdrew. Cadis reached for Vox. It failed. No signal, no static, no rejection, just emptiness. We turned without instruction. The seated warrior remained still. The painted wall behind remained alive. The frescoers looked back, Astartes in silent council. The doorway ahead reopened into a hallway none of us recognized. We moved again, step by step through the veiled corridor. The air tasted dry, like burned parchment. The walls narrowed, fingers of stone pressing close. Scripture ran along the edges in high Gothic, sprawled and flowing, the characters refusing comprehension, as though each letter rearranged itself from behind our vision. "I've seen this word before," Agris whispered. He stepped forward and traced one swirl. He said, "I've seen this before," eyes locked on the curve. "Where?" Cadis replied quietly. "In a dream, but not my own." We followed but didn't speak. Not even breathing felt safe here. We came to a large vault lined with statues, each sculpted with the face of an Ultramarine. Not just any, but ours. Every one of us. Stone likenesses, carved from alabaster, softened around ears and cheeks. The same line of my brow, the same faint scar etched into cheekplate. I wanted to touch, but didn't. Cadis turned, facing his statue, and laid a hand to its chest. Warmth pulsed through his gauntlet. That intimate heat startled him, but he remained steady. A breath became sound. Not from us, from between the statues. A chord began, an impossible hymn. Not with voice, not with music. Memory of music. We felt it pulse behind our temples, pressing on our bones. I felt as though the vault exhaled around us. The faux sky returned in evening light, not daylight or starlight, just empty, shifting brightness. We stared upward, and the ceiling thundered low in memory, but unmoved. Thetis spoke again. "We're in the echo of our own making." Cadis nodded, but made no move. Agris, hands trembling, touched his statue's shoulder. "Am I carved into a story that already ends?" he asked quietly. The figure before him shifted subtly. One gauntlet lifted upward as if to comfort or accuse. We did not move. We could not. In that hall, surrounded by reflections of ourselves, the hymn rose again. It did not come from a choir. It came from within. Bone pressed under stone, a chorus of memory buried deep in the vault's heart. I felt every step we had taken echo in my soul, each name pulsing under the vault's calling, each failure, each incomplete litany, each whisper unchecked. Then the hymn grew stronger, as though calling us to finish it, a command on the edge of hearing. Then it fell silent. At that very moment, the statues began to melt, not in heat, but in time, eroding instantly into dust. The faces collapsed. The limbs crept toward stumps. Dust fell around us, covering our boots. We shivered, not from chill, but from the weight of knowing. We left the vault without speaking. The corridor beyond no longer bore scripture. It was bare, clean-cut stone. It felt like leaving a shrine and entering a tomb. We slowed our pace as though stepping from memory into sunlight. But outside waited only more darkness. The hymn didn't start from anywhere. It came alive, already echoing in our minds. Not audible, not localized, just present. A sound remembered without ever having been heard. Each note hovered with a reverence I couldn't place, like a prayer that had survived too many tongues, too many lifetimes. We stood surrounded by stone renditions of ourselves, not carved from marble, but shaped from something darker, polished basalt or obsidian. Each figure was perfect in detail, down to the scrapes on our shoulder plates and the faintest battle damage. Cadis's statue bore the crack in his vambrace from a siege I knew had never been recorded. Agris's face was clenched in the same cautious tension he wore now. Thecus moved among them, his hand hovering near each, not touching, only feeling for the residue of thought. His voice came over the vox, hushed, more reverent than afraid. He said he couldn't read them clearly, that the echoes in the stone were fragmented, not erased, but overwritten by layers of unvoiced recollection. He paused near one statue, his own. The face was covered with a mask, not a helmet, not armor, but a smooth veil of sculpted metal, blank and cold. He asked if any of us saw his features beneath. None of us did. Beyond the statues stood an archway leading into a hall filled with shifting blue light, the color of Macragge's oceans as seen from orbit, flickering like water reflecting fire. We passed beneath the arch in formation. The moment we stepped through, the weight of memory thickened. Not nostalgia, something else. The pressure of being remembered incorrectly, as if we had become misquotes of ourselves. The chamber opened into an expansive vault, circular and alive with motionless detail. A fresco encircled the dome overhead, intricate and massive, yet every figure depicted was incomplete. Arms ended in brushstrokes, faces hovered without contours, armor plates blended into fog. The colors shimmered faintly, not in paint, but in recollection, as if memory itself was the medium. I looked for context. I saw battles that could have happened, rituals performed under an alien sky, moments of glory no chapter chronicle had recorded, and always, central to the images, a figure shrouded in the colors of Ultramar but blurred at the edges, like something either not yet born or long since forgotten. Every mural had this figure somewhere, never facing us, never clear. Agris gestured toward the base of the dome. A long, low dais stretched outward, containing a single object, an archivum spool. Its casing was immaculate, trimmed with bronze etched in Terran dialects, far older than the codex. Cadis approached, kneeling slightly, not from deference, but for calibration. He connected a relay line from his vambrace, and the device came to life without sound. The projection that rose above it wasn't words, wasn't data, it was a memory. A voice filled our helms, male, strong, clipped like a battlefield vox, yet wrong in a way I couldn't describe. It began reciting names, designations, positions. It listed Ultramarines. Most were known, though dead. Others had never existed or were erased from record. One name repeated, Thesis. We turned toward him. He hadn't moved. His posture was rigid, jaw clenched beneath his helm. He admitted nothing, but I could hear his breath slow. The spool repeated the name again, each time shifting tone slightly, as if trying different inflections. The mural above us altered then, its lower sections filled in, the missing features resolved. The scenes now depicted us, here, now, each of us rendered in real time, frozen in postures we hadn't yet taken, standing in positions we hadn't moved to. Cadis stepped away from the spool. It responded as if insulted, dimming slightly before fading into silence. Thecus moved toward the mural. He raised his staff, but no power shimmered at its tip. He said something in a tongue I'd never heard him use, not Fenrisian, not High Gothic, something deeper. The fresco responded. It bled, not in color, in clarity. The image blurred, bled into itself, returned to the soft fog it had displayed before. From behind the mural, the sound returned, one long inhale, the same breath we'd heard when the vault door closed. This time, it did not fade. We turned toward the arch, but the doorway was gone. Only wall remained, bearing a relief we hadn't noticed earlier. It showed the fortress of Hera, viewed from above, but distorted, as if time had warped its spires. One wing of the fortress was submerged in stone, as though it had fallen into the mountain itself. Thetis spoke then, not through the vox, just aloud. "This is not a place of secrets. It is a vault for the forgotten, not to preserve, but to misplace." Cadis looked to him sharply. "How would you know that?" Thetis hesitated. His voice trembled for the first time. "Because I came here once." We didn't move. Not for a full minute. The weight of that statement settled into our armor, like gravity increasing. He continued, "Not in this life, but my dreams. They always end in this hall. I never understood why. I thought it was a leftover from battle, a psychic echo from some field deployment. But I remember now." Cadis asked him what else he remembered. Thetis answered slowly, "I stood here. I saw my own statue, but I wasn't Thetis then. We surrounded him, but not out of suspicion. There was no threat, only clarity falling apart. A low hum began to rise from the walls, the same tone as the original hymn, but altered, broken in intervals. The lighting shifted. The murals stopped flickering, their images now locked. I turned toward the painting that had once shown me. It now showed a scene from my childhood, my training cohort, my old drill master. He was smiling. That was impossible. The vault shimmered slightly, not physically, not visually. The shimmer came through the sense of self. I felt myself standing there, and I also felt myself 2 steps away, and I knew one of those versions had died during the First Tyrannic War. Agris asked if we were being rewritten. Thesis said we were being misremembered. The distinction mattered, though I couldn't explain why. Cadis gave a final order. He said we would find the source, not to destroy, just to understand. The vault hadn't rejected us. It had recorded us. We were becoming part of the structure. The murals no longer reflected myth. They showed memory folding inward, collapsing until only suggestion remained. We advanced toward a new hall. It hadn't been there moments before. The air was warmer now, thicker with recognition. And though no one said it, we all shared the same certainty. This vault was never built to hold something dangerous. It was built to contain remembrance, and it was remembering us now. The corridor led downward, not by gradient, but by weight. Each step felt heavier, as though the very act of descent pulled not only our bodies, but our memories behind us. There were no walls now, only the suggestion of them. The edges of our vision softened. Auspex showed no boundaries, yet none of us wandered from the path. Something in the air held us to it, not with pressure or command, but with implication. We followed because we were already meant to. No one spoke. The silence wasn't a tactical choice. It was a language spoken here. Our vox feeds remained linked, but no voice emerged. We each knew the others were thinking. We just didn't remember how to share it. A light appeared ahead, dim at first, green-gold in hue. It wasn't cast from a lumen, but from memory that had been left running too long. As we entered the next chamber, our boots crossed a threshold that didn't exist moments before. The light adjusted, not brightening, just acknowledging presence. A library stretched outward. Books, reels, tablets of data slate alloy. But none bore chapter markings. No imperial aquila, no sigil of the 13th. The air buzzed faintly, like thousands of whispers just beyond hearing. The room was circular, divided by concentric shelves, each layered with stacked knowledge that felt half forbidden. The outermost shelf held texts in Gothic. The inner shelves darkened in content and material, changing in both medium and message. By the final circle near the chamber's core, the pages were not pages. They were skin. Agris moved toward the inner ring. His fingers paused above one of the tomes, not out of fear, but confusion. He asked if anyone else could hear it. Not speaking, he said, but remembering. I stepped closer, my mind filled with images from my novitiate. I saw my old sergeant, the one who died at Chorus Reach. His voice told me again how to aim during planetary descent. Not a hallucination, a recording. My own memory, but replayed by something outside of me. Thesis said the library wasn't built for knowledge. It was constructed to unlearn. Every shelf was a measure of forgetting, each volume a memory removed, stored here so it wouldn't disturb the one who had lived it. The air grew warmer the deeper we went, not with heat, but familiarity. Cadis passed by a text shaped like a reductor blade. When he looked at it, his helm's optics flared for half a second. He reached to touch it. It vanished before his gauntlet made contact. The floor below us rippled. Not literally. It shifted as though reality itself was being corrected. A false memory being removed, a layer peeled back. The central dais lit with a soft blue hue. From it rose a single throne, not regal, functional. Shaped for a transhuman frame, worn in its angles and cracked in its armrest. Sitting within it, still and serene, was another Astartes. He bore no heraldry. His armor had no shine, no symbols, no allegiance. He looked at us. Only Cadis stepped forward. "Identify yourself," he said, not as a challenge, but as ritual. The seated warrior did not respond. Instead, a thin light emerged behind his eyes. It flickered once and cast a projection into the space around him. The image was Macragge, but not as we knew it. The fortress of Hera was incomplete, its battlements younger, more brutal. The spires were shorter, their banners unfamiliar, and where our chapter sigils should have been, blank stone sat. We watched as time passed rapidly across the projection. Banners raised and fell, statues appeared and were destroyed. Names were inscribed and erased. But each cycle ended the same way, with silence. The fortress darkened, the stars above dimmed, the vaults beneath it sealed. Then, with no voice, the projection shifted to another memory, one we had never seen, but all of us recognized. It showed each of us, isolated, not as warriors, but as initiates. Alone, cold, kneeling in chapels before armor that hadn't yet been assigned to us. It showed the moments we forgot, those just before ascension, the ones the hypno-doctrination buried. We saw the fear we weren't allowed to admit. We saw ourselves cry, not in grief, in unknowing. Thesis fell to one knee. His breathing grew strained. "It's drawing them out," he muttered. Cadis stood tall. "No," he answered, quiet but unshaken. "It's offering them back." The seated figure raised his hand. The vox across our helms surged, not with command channels, but liturgical fragments long removed from chapter practice. I recognized none of the words, yet I understood them. They were doctrines. Doctrines of forgetting. Passages on how to discard memory, how to bury guilt under honor, how to repurpose doubt into silence. Each line was a knife used to trim the soul, leaving behind only obedience. The library wasn't built to store what had been learned. It was constructed to maintain what should not be remembered. Agris broke from the group, stepping closer to the throne. The seated figure turned its gaze on him, and for a second, everything within the room tilted. I don't mean physically. I mean memory itself bent, like a tower folding inward. I saw Agris on a battlefield I never knew existed, his body broken, calling out for help. His brothers walked past him, not because they had failed him, but because they had been ordered to forget he was there. He screamed and dropped to his knees. The image vanished. The seated warrior remained still. Cadis turned to us. We were sent to examine the vault, not what it stored, but why it was sealed. We thought it was because of danger. That was wrong. Thesis answered without looking up. It wasn't danger that needed containment. It was us, Cadis finished. We stared at the throne. The truth did not roar. It did not twist into revelation. It only waited to be understood, and we were beginning to. We descended deeper than we should have. The vault's architecture defied mapping. Straight halls curved, stairs unfolded into ramps. Readings from our armor were contradictory, gyroscopes losing orientation even as our boots pressed against something solid. No alarms sounded, no faults registered, yet direction became an idea, not a certainty. Thesis said the place was memory-shaped, not matter-bound. And if that was true, we were walking inside a thought, long buried but still awoke. Ahead, light gathered with purpose. Unlike before, this glow did not pulse or flicker. It simply was, a presence held in equilibrium, hanging above a chamber that waited with too much stillness. It wasn't quiet, it was arrested. The room stretched wider than any we'd passed. No ceiling, no defined walls. Only that blue-gold haze, static and endless. At its center stood a device, part clock, part throne, part reliquary. Its shape resisted logic. Gears turned against nothing. Pendulums swung in directions that had no anchor. Engraved across its limbs were the numerals of Ultramar, but they were twisted as though written in reverse, half remembered from an age before even Reboot spoke them aloud. Cadis moved to the perimeter. His blade remained sheathed, but his fingers curled like they remembered war. Agris scanned the surrounding haze. There was nothing. No targets, no mechanisms, no threats, only disorientation layered like vapor, too thin to fight, too thick to ignore. Thetis approached the device. He paused at one of its arms, a brass fixture shaped like a memory blade. He didn't touch it. His voice broke the quiet. "It's not a machine," he said. "It's a misremembering, engineered." He traced one glyph with his finger in the air, not on the surface. It draws from what's been forgotten, but not deleted. It rearranges events. Not time travel, not warp trickery, just selective memory, built with precision. Cadis asked what that meant. "It means this place doesn't record history. It decides which parts should feel true." None of us spoke for a time. We simply watched. The machine continued turning, not in loops, but in decisions. Every click of its rotating structure pulled us subtly sideways, not in location, but in perception. It wasn't the room that shifted. It was who we thought we were within it. One by one, panels emerged along the floor. Not with mechanical motion, just a slow acceptance that they'd always been there. Each one bore a sigil, none matched. They weren't from known campaigns or honor rolls. Some bore pre-imperial scripts, others shapes we recognized only from forgotten dreams. One panel displayed my name. Another showed Thetis's, but altered. Thesiax, a word that echoed like a scar. Agris saw a seal that resembled his, though the rank attached was higher than any he'd held. Captain of a company that no longer existed, fighting in a war that had never happened. We stood over those names and felt the room press gently inward, not with force, but familiarity. It was recognizing us, yet not as we were, but as we might have been. This vault did not contain artifacts. It housed identities denied existence. The machine clicked again, and the air split, not with light, not with sound, but with clarity. A new figure stood in the chamber. It did not arrive. It had always been there, simply no longer hidden. It wore our armor, or a version of it. Ancient, pre-heresy in design. Its heraldry had been removed, not scratched away, not defaced, forgotten. The individual carried no weapons. Still, no one approached. Thesis stepped forward, slow and steady. He met the figure's gaze, though it wore no helm, no face, only a reflection. The one who stood there looked exactly like Thesis, but older, not aged, worn. Cadis drew breath, ready to speak, but Thesis raised his hand, not to silence him, but to acknowledge that no explanation was required. He reached out, not to touch, but to remember. The figure did the same, and then it vanished. No collapse, no light, just gone. In its place remained a glyph, burned into the air itself, not floating, not projected. Present. It bore a word we could not read but understood. Judication. Thesis fell to one knee, not from pain, but remembrance. I was erased, he whispered. Not killed, just unwritten. He did not explain further. We didn't ask. The machine ticked once more. Now its pendulum stopped, and the room filled with images. Not visions, corrections. Agris's earliest deployment, once thought to be his first honor mark, now played differently. His squad perished not in battle, but in trial. Cadis stood beside Guilliman, not as commander, but as judgment bearer, delivering oaths to forget entire companies for doctrinal failure. I saw myself standing at a ceremony, but no one knew my name. We each watched truths that had been scrubbed for the sake of cohesion. The vault didn't just store memory, it buried what did not serve. That was the function of this room, the chamber with no time, because time here was never real, only consequence was. The machine began to wind backward, slowly. Every rotation removed something from our minds. We couldn't stop it. Thesis shouted. He activated his psychic ward, flooding the space with null light. The engine froze. Only then did we feel the weight that had been pressed into our minds, memories we had never made, yet believed. We had seen too much, and remembered more than we had earned. Cadis turned. End it, he said. Thesis raised his staff. One final pulse of null light surged outward. The engine screamed, not in sound, but through thought. Every panel went blank. The haze receded, and once again the room became stone, unfinished, uncertain. We did not speak. We would not record this. Even our gene seed could not hold it. Yet still, as we stepped from the chamber, one thought stayed with each of us. This vault had not misled. It had simply preserved the right to choose what should be true, and now it remembered us for remembering it. We rose from the depths slowly, one foot after another, not because of injury or fatigue, but because we were uncertain how to walk forward when nothing behind us could be placed. The vault had ceased to echo, not due to silence. It was something subtler, the kind of hush that follows a decision, one that cannot be voiced, but hangs in the space between names. The corridors had narrowed during our descent, yet now they felt broader, though we knew we hadn't changed floors or direction. The architecture shifted with our thoughts. It moved gently when we dared remember. Thesis led without word or gesture. His steps were measured, not by tempo, but by significance. I followed close behind, and in that moment, I could not say whether we had walked these same halls hours ago or days. Agris murmured behind me, repeating a passage in High Gothic I had never heard him use, something about burden through stillness. Cadis took rear, not with vigilance but solemnity, as if guarding something already past. The outer chamber greeted us not as a room, but a reflection. Its stones seemed pale where once they were dark, its supports too straight, almost cautious in their design. Where the statue of the Primarch once stood, with eternal defiance, only a plinth remained. Not damaged, not overturned, just absent. The floor bore no scratch, no displacement. No residue clung to the pedestal's surface. It was not defiled. It had been untethered. We circled the spot without agreement. We each wanted to see it from a different angle, as if the past might cast a shadow if viewed obliquely enough. The vault had begun to retract from us, not physically, but consciously. What it had shown, what it had tried to return, was no longer being offered. It had completed what it intended, though what that purpose had been, none of us could yet name. We walked toward the outer seal, our movements echoing faintly. The sound barely met the edges of the corridor. No resonance lingered. Vox hums felt thinner than before. Our suits still functioned, armor plating unmarred by time or war, yet something beneath the ceramite felt altered. Not corruption, not flaw, just realignment. My internal systems displayed all standard readings, but each value felt like it had been borrowed from another version of me, one that still existed in another design of history. The final gate was open. We had sealed it behind us. Now it waited, offering no sound of release, no mechanical noise to greet our return. Just that thin blue light again, the same shade that had led us down and whispered through every surface we'd passed. Beyond the gate, the mountain wind stirred. Air touched us not with relief, but with inquiry, as though it had never felt us before. The sky was the same, clouds veiling the stars in thin mist, yet I struggled to remember how they had looked just one day prior. We crossed the threshold as a unit. No words passed, not because there was nothing to say, but because language had become too coarse for what now occupied our minds. We boarded the waiting Storm Raven gunship. Its hull hummed, its systems obedient. No crew inside, no orders required. It knew to wait. Whether by programming or memory, it understood. Once within, the hatches sealed. The internal lights dimmed, adjusted, then held. Cadis activated the flight pattern manually. He did not request support from orbit. No astropathic ping, no Vox log transmitted. There would be no record of extraction. The logs would show entry, nothing more. We lifted, and the fortress of Hera fell beneath us. I watched the rising strata of rock and sky. The mountain folded behind itself, and with it, the entrance to the vault vanished. Not hidden, gone, as if it had never existed within the mountain's ribs. I stared until the haze rendered all detail moot. Only then did I let my head fall back. Thetis sat across from me. His gaze had not shifted since we boarded. His staff lay against his chest, pulsing faintly. The runes once etched so clearly into its shaft now seemed uncertain, lines not erased but softened, like text pressed too many times into parchment. He blinked and looked toward the bulkhead door. I knew what he sought. It wasn't escape. It was anchoring. Agris broke our stillness with a sound, not a word, but a breath caught between realization and refusal. He raised his hand and tapped one of the armor seals at his neck. The auto-suture flared, then he paused. His expression wasn't pain, it was awareness. "I know a name," he said, voice low, barely more than a rustle. We waited. He said it. None of us recognized it. Not in records, not in campaigns, not from our lives. Yet it rang true. Cadis repeated it, not to affirm, but to test how it sounded in another voice. I whispered it once under my breath. It felt like breathing into someone else's lungs. Thetis shook his head slowly. I don't think it was ours to remember. No one disagreed. The storm raven passed from Atmo to void. Still no signal, still no report. Not a word had been sent to Macragge's command, and none came to meet us. When the vessel docked with the orbital platform, the hangar welcomed us without query. The servitors opened the gate, no questions asked. As we stepped onto the steel gantry, I looked back once at the hull markings. They shimmered slightly under the arc lights, but something was missing. The designation number was gone. The paint was not scrubbed. It simply no longer bore any identifier. This was no longer the ship we had boarded. The platform's corridors were silent. Tech priests moved about their duties. Deck crews continued refueling drills. No one stopped us. No salute. No record. It was as if we had never left, or perhaps had never returned. I returned to my cell in the reclusium hours later. No summons awaited, no debriefing, no mention of what we had uncovered. I opened my sealed Vox journal. It still recorded prior entries, dates aligned, tasks filed, reports complete. But when I searched for the mission order, Vault Invocation 9 Gamma, no file existed. I checked my armor logs. Movement patterns remained, but location markers were gone. I removed the helm. Its interior display flickered once, then stabilized. At the edge of the screen, a glyph appeared. It wasn't Ultramarine, not Mechanicum. A single line curved into a downward spiral, like a fingerprint pressed too hard into stone. I did not touch it. That night, I dreamt of the vault again, but I was not within it. I was beneath it, looking up at the stone, and I could hear voices murmuring, not in words, but in structure. They were shaping something, not lies, not doctrine, but decisions. When I woke, the name Agris had spoken still echoed behind my eyes. I tried to write it. My hand would not finish the letters. I tried to say it again aloud. The air resisted, not violently, just with refusal. In the days that followed, I walked the fortress many times. In the Chapel of Remembrance, I found a new banner. Old, tattered, but one I had never seen before. The name stitched beneath it was familiar, but it wasn't ours. I knelt, then stood, and as I stepped away, the banner disappeared. No sound, no shift, only gone. Weeks passed, then months. I began noticing other things, memory lapses, not mine, others. Young recruits forgetting oaths they had sworn that morning. Senior sergeants stumbling over campaign names long worn across their armor. A librarian paused mid-write, uncertain if the phrase he spoke had ever existed. When I asked Thetis, he only said this: "It's begun watching again." I didn't ask what. He wouldn't have answered. I still remember the vault, most of it. Not all, never all. And that's what keeps it alive. Not knowledge, not fear, but fragments. Because memory isn't a weapon. It's a mirror.
And when the mirror starts watching back,
we forget who's really reflected.